In the late 1930s, the skies were changing. Nations were arming faster than ever, and air power was becoming the key to victory. The United States, still climbing out of the Great Depression, knew that the next war would be won not by armies, but by engines. At the heart of that race was a company from Connecticut, Pratt Whitney. Their mission was simple: build an engine so powerful, so reliable, and so efficient that no other nation could rival it. The result was the 100 acted double-S. Wasp, an 18-cylinder radial monster that would forever redefine what piston engines could do. But the story of how it was created and how close it came to failure reveals a shocking truth about America's wartime innovation and the terrifying limits of human engineering. Number 1. The race for power. By 1938, the world was already at the edge of war. Germany's Luftwaffe had proven what modern air power could do in Spain and Poland. Japan's Eurofighter ruled the Pacific skies. The US Navy and Army Air Corps needed engines that could push their fighters and bombers higher, faster, and farther than ever before. Pratt & Whitney engineers knew the challenge ahead. They needed to double the power output of their existing engines without doubling their weight. Their previous success, the R-2800 twin Wasp, powered famous aircraft like the DC-3 and the PBY Catalina, but by 1939, even that engine was falling behind. So the engineers made a bold decision: build something entirely new, a twin, radial with 18 cylinders, producing over 2,000 horsepower. It would be called the R-2800 Acton 200 Double Wasp. At the time, no American engine had ever reached that level of output. The risk was enormous. The materials, cooling systems, and metallurgy simply hadn't been tested for that kind of sustained performance. Number 2. The engineering nightmare. On the surface, the R-engine, Tupanita Sig. 2800 looked like a masterpiece, compact, symmetrical, and immensely powerful, but behind the factory doors, it was a nightmare. The first prototypes overheated constantly. The front cylinders cooled properly, but the rear rows hidden behind them suffered from heat buildup that caused detonation, cylinder cracking, and catastrophic bearing failures. Every test run ended the same way: flames, smoke, and silence. The problem wasn't design, it was materials science. At 2,000 horsepower, temperatures inside the engine reached beyond what aluminum pistons could tolerate. Valve guides warped, oil turned into vapor, cooling fins glowed red hot. One test engineer said, "Duels, we weren't testing engines, we were testing explosions." The project teetered on the edge of collapse, but Pratt & Whitney refused to stop. America's war effort depended on them. Number 3. The breakthrough. The breakthrough came in 1940 not through genius, but through stubborn persistence. Engineers redesigned the airflow path through the cowlings, adding a tight-fitting baffle system that forced cooling air evenly over every cylinder. They experimented with new alloys, nickel-chrome steel, and heat-resistant valve seats, and introduced sodium-cooled exhaust valves, an innovation borrowed from racing engines. The results were immediate. Temperatures dropped by nearly 100 degrees. The R-2800 was reborn, a beast that could run at full power for hours without failure. It became the first piston engine capable of producing 2,000 horsepower reliably. As America entered the war, the R-2800 went from an experimental gamble to the beating heart of U.S. air power. Number 4. The sky becomes its battlefield when the U.S. joined World War E. The double Wasp roared to life. It powered the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a massive single-engine fighter so heavy it needed the 2800's full thrust just to climb, but once airborne, it became unstoppable, able to dive at over 500 miles per hour, shrugging off flak and enemy fire. In the Pacific, the Vought-4 U Corsair, with its inverted gull wings and double Wasp engine, became the terror of Japanese pilots. Its top speed, nearly 450 miles per hour, was unmatched by any piston fighter in the region. And in the skies over Europe, the Grumman F-6F Hellcat, another double Wasp creation, destroyed more than 5,000 enemy aircraft, helping secure air dominance for the Allies. The double Wasp had done what the TR 3350 could not. It combined massive power with near-perfect reliability, but that reliability came at a price few ever knew. Number 5. The price of perfection. As demand skyrocketed, Pratt & Whitney factories ran 24 hours a day. Thousands of engines were built each month, with workers under extreme pressure to meet deadlines. Quality control suffered. New mechanics, barely trained, assembled engines that would later power aircraft into combat. Some engines left the factory with microscopic flaws, loose bolts, misaligned piston rings, oil leaks that could cause fires mid-flight. Yet, remarkably, the double Wasp endured. It was so forgiving in design that even when mishandled, it kept running. Pilots called it the engine that refused to die. Many Thunderbolts returned from combat with entire cylinders blown off, yet the engine kept turning, bringing pilots home on half its power. One Navy pilot famously landed his Corsair after taking anti-aircraft fire that completely destroyed Dean 1 cylinder bank. The R-2800 still ran, coughing, sputtering, but alive. Number 6. The shocking truth. The real shocking truth behind the double Wasp isn't that it was powerful, it's that it succeeded because of failure. Every innovation inside it, from its heat-resistant metals to its baffled cooling design, came from years of engines catching fire, seizing, and exploding. Pratt and Whitney didn't build perfection, they built resilience. They created an engine that could endure abuse, neglect, and battle damage, and still get its pilot home. Unlike other engines that were over-engineered and fragile, the double Wasp was built for chaos. It wasn't meant to run perfectly. It was meant to run no matter what. That's why, even after the war, when jet engines took over the skies, the R-2800 refused to fade away. It powered post-war airliners like the Douglas DC-6, Convair 240, and even the Martin 404, connecting continents before the jet age began. While others chased speed, Pratt and Whitney built endurance. Number 7. The jet age arrives. By the 1950s, the jet revolution was unstoppable. The roar of piston engines was replaced by the shriek of turbines. The double Wasp's time was ending, but not without one final act. In Korea, the Douglas Ah-1 Skyraider, powered by the R-2800, flew some of the most dangerous low-altitude missions in aviation history. It carried more bombs than a World War E B-17, taking off from short carrier decks and returning riddled with bullets. And every time, that same old engine, born before Pearl Harbor, roared back to life. Even in Vietnam, decades later, the Skyraider and its 2000S continued to fly rescue missions, saving downed pilots in enemy territory. The double Wasp had outlived the war it was built for, the planes it powered, and even the technology that replaced it. Number 8. A legend remembered. Today, the R-2800 is remembered as one of the most successful piston engines in history. More than 125,000 units were built, many still run on restored Thunderbolts, Corsairs, and DC-6s, roaring across air shows as living thunder. When those engines start, the air vibrates. The prop spins, and 18 cylinders come alive, a sound both mechanical and human, the rhythm of an era that refused to die quietly. But what few know is how close it all came to disaster. How the early engines nearly doomed the entire project, how engineers worked sleepless nights to fix problems no one had solved before. The R-200's legacy isn't just power, it's persistence. It represents what happens when failure isn't an option, when technology becomes a race against time, and when the world's fate literally hangs on a piston ring. Number 9. The final truth. So what's the shocking truth behind Pratt & Whitney's R-2800? It's this. The double Wasp wasn't a miracle of perfection, it was a triumph of imperfection mastered. It burned hotter, pushed harder, and flew longer than it ever should have. It was built in an era before computers, before advanced alloys, before simulation, yet it performed beyond what anyone thought possible. And while the jet age eventually replaced it, no engine ever earned more respect from those who flew it, because in the end, power isn't just about horsepower, it's about trust. And every pilot who heard that R-2800 roar knew, no matter what happened, it would bring them home. To the Pratt & Whitney, R-2800 and Wasp wasn't just an engine, it was a legend forged in the crucible of war. Built during a time when the world was burning, it became the mechanical soul of America's air power, propelling everything from nimble fighters to massive bombers across oceans and continents. With 18 cylinders arranged in 2 perfect rows and displacing over 2,800 cubic inches, the double Wasp unleashed up to 2,400 horsepower, a staggering figure for the 1940s. But numbers alone couldn't capture what it meant to those who trusted their lives to it. It powered icons, the 4U Corsair, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the F-6F Hellcat, aircraft that fought in every corner of the Second World War. In the Pacific, double Wasp powered planes faced brutal humidity, salt, and heat. In Europe, they tore through flak and freezing skies. Pilots swore by it, mechanics respected it. It started every time, even after taking hits, oil leaks, or battle damage that would have silenced lesser engines. The R-2800 was built like a fortress, compact, rugged, and relentless. When other engines overheated, the double Wasp ran cool. When others coughed and failed under pressure, it kept pounding with a deep, defiant growl that echoed across the sky. It was this reliability that gave Allied pilots an edge, an invisible shield of confidence. They knew that even if the mission went wrong, their engine wouldn't, or it could climb, dive, and fight through anything. That reputation made the best. 2800, the most produced and trusted high-performance radial engine of its time, with over 125,000 built. After the war, the double Wasp refused to fade into history. It found new life powering the Douglas DC-6, Convair 240, and Martin 404, the airliners that carried the post-war world into the jet age. It's not just nostalgia, it's reverence. The R-2800 double Wasp was more than an engine. It was America's beating heart, forged in fire, tested in war, and remembered in thunder. And even today, when one starts up and shakes the ground beneath your feet, you can still hear it whisper, "I was built to survive."